They had written him off as just another statistic, another nameless face caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. They believed his uniform and badge carried no weight against their guns and authority. On a quiet, lonely stretch of highway in Georgia, two corrupt deputies pulled over a man they assumed was nothing more than a thug. What they never imagined was that the figure bleeding out on the dark asphalt was Major Julian Holt, the United States Army's finest trauma surgeon, a man who had saved the lives of senators, generals, and countless soldiers under fire. They fired the shots that would soon echo across the nation. Yet they forgot one unbreakable truth: the United States Army takes care of its own. When the Pentagon answered the call, the careers of every tainted officer in that precinct were not merely ended, they were incinerated. This is the story of how arrogance finally met absolute power. Major Julian Holt looked down at his hands. They were steady. They had always been steady. Earlier that same day, those same strong brown hands had been deep inside the chest cavity of a 19-year-old private who had suffered a catastrophic training accident during a live-fire mortar drill. The young soldier's aorta had been nicked. By every medical expectation, the boy should have bled out right there on the tarmac at Fort Stewart. But Julian did not believe in by all rights. He believed in precision, in speed, and in the fierce, unyielding will to deny death its prize. He had saved the boy. Now the adrenaline was fading, replaced by the heavy, welcome fatigue that comes only after a life has been pulled back from the edge. Julian stripped off his scrubs and changed into his dress blues. He did not usually wear the service dress uniform for the drive home, but tonight was different. It was his daughter Lila's 10th birthday, and he had promised her he would look like a superhero when he walked through the door for dinner. He studied his reflection in the locker room mirror. The silver oak leaf of a major gleamed on his shoulder boards. The combat medical badge sat high on his chest, resting above a ribbon rack that told the story of 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Syria. He was not merely a doctor. He was a soldier who had operated while mortar sand rained onto the surgical drape. "Heading out, Major?" Julian turned to see Colonel Harlan Beck, the hospital commander, leaning against the doorframe. The older man was a battle-scarred veteran who rarely smiled, yet tonight he was grinning. "Yes, sir. It's Lila's 10th birthday. If I miss the cake cutting, I might as well deploy for another year. It would be safer." Colonel Beck chuckled. "You did good work today, Julian. That kid's parents are flying in from Ohio. I told them their son is alive because we have the best damn surgeon in the armed forces on call." His voice softened. "Take the back roads, Julian. The interstate is a parking lot. There's a wreck near the Savannah exit." "Roger that, sir. I'll take Route 17 through the county. See you at 0600. Julian grabbed his keys to his pride and joy, a restored 1969 Chevrolet Chevelle SS, painted deep midnight black. It was a classic American muscle car, the kind that turned heads wherever it went. He loved that car almost as much as he loved the silence of the drive home after a chaotic shift. As he stepped into the parking lot, the Georgia air hung thick and humid. The crickets had already begun their nightly chorus. He tossed his uniform cap onto the passenger seat, loosened his tie just a fraction, and fired up the engine. The V8 roared to life with a guttural growl that vibrated through the chassis. He pulled out of the base gates, saluting the military police officer on duty, and merged onto the highway. The setting sun painted the sky in deep bruises of purple and orange. For a while, everything felt perfect. He was simply a man, a father, driving home to his little girl. He turned off the main highway onto Route 17, a 2-lane stretch of blacktop that wound through the dense pine forests of Liberty County. It was darker here. Streetlights were scarce. The trees crowded close to the road, creating a tunnel of shadows. Julian checked his speedometer. He was traveling exactly at the limit. He never sped. He understood the statistics all too well. He knew that a black man in a nice car on a rural southern road already drove with a target on his back. He had no intention of giving anyone a reason. His hands stayed at 10 and 2, his eyes scanning the tree line for deer. He did not see any deer, but he saw the headlights. Behind him, out of the darkness, a pair of blinding LEDs suddenly flared to life. They were close, far too close, tailgating aggressively. Julian frowned and tapped his brakes lightly to signal the driver to back off. Instead, the car behind swerved hard, and red and blue lights exploded across the night. Sheriff's Department. Julian's stomach tightened, not because he had done anything wrong, but because he knew how these stops often went. He knew the script. He exhaled slowly, eased the Chevelle onto the narrow gravel shoulder, and put it in park. "Okay, Julian," he whispered to himself. "Just a busted taillight or something routine. Keep it professional. You're an officer in the United States Army. You're going to be fine." He killed the engine, turned on the interior dome light the way his father had taught him, and rolled down the window. Both hands rested on the steering wheel, fingers spread wide so they could be seen. In the side mirror, a spotlight hit the glass and blinded him. He squinted, trying to make out the figures approaching. There were two of them. One stayed back near the cruiser, hand hovering near his holster. The other, a large man whose gut strained against his beige uniform shirt, swaggered toward the driver's side. This was Deputy Brock Tanner, and tonight Tanner was bored, angry, and looking for a fight. Deputy Tanner did not look at the car. He looked at the driver. He saw a black man behind the wheel of a muscle car that cost more than Tanner made in 3 years. That was strike one. Tanner stopped at the window, chewing on something, perhaps tobacco, or simply his own bitterness. He said nothing. He did not ask for license and registration. He simply shone his heavy maglite flashlight straight into Julian's eyes. "Officer," Julian said, his voice calm and steady. "Is there a problem? Get out of the car," Tanner ordered. Julian blinked against the glare, but kept his hands on the wheel. "Officer, I'm happy to comply, but may I ask why I've been pulled over? I was going the speed limit." "I said get your ass out of the car, boy. I smell marijuana." Julian's heart hammered against his ribs, but his face remained like stone. It was the same expression he wore when an artery burst during surgery. Complete control. "Officer, I am a major in the United States Army. I am a surgeon. I do not smoke marijuana. I am in full uniform." Tanner laughed. It was a dry, ugly sound. "A major? You? I've seen Halloween costumes that looked better than that. Stolen valor is a crime. You know that?" "Check my ID," Julian said, nodding toward the glove box. "My military ID and driver's license are in the glove compartment. I am going to reach for them now." "Don't you move!" Tanner roared, his hand snapping to his gun. At the rear of the car, the rookie partner, Deputy Lyle Corbin, looked nervous. "Hey, Tanner, he's got a uniform, man. Maybe we should just check the plates." "Shut up, Corbin," Tanner snapped without looking back. He turned his attention back to Julian. "You think you're smart? You think a fancy suit and a shiny car makes you untouchable? Open the door." Slowly, Julian calculated his options in an instant. If he stayed in the car, Tanner might smash the window and drag him out. If he got out, he would be vulnerable. But the Army had taught him de-escalation. "I am opening the door," Julian narrated his actions clearly. "I am stepping out." He unlatched the door and stepped onto the gravel. He stood at his full height of 6 feet 2 inches. The dress blue uniform was impeccable. The gold braid, the sharp creases of the trousers, the heavy combat ribbons. In the glow of the dome light, it was undeniable. For a second, Tanner hesitated. The uniform looked real. But Tanner's ego was the size of the county, and he had already committed. To back down now, in front of the rookie, would be humiliation. He had to find something, anything. "Turn around," Tanner barked. "Hands on the hood. Spread 'em." "Officer," Julian said firmly, "this is unnecessary. You are making a mistake. I am a senior medical officer returning from Fort Stewart. You can call Colonel Beck right now. I don't give a damn who you know." Tanner shoved Julian hard against the Chevelle. The metal groaned. "I said spread 'em." Julian's face slammed into the cold roof of his car. A flash of hot anger surged through him, but he tamped it down immediately. Survive, he told himself. Just survive the next few minutes. Then the JAG Corps would deal with this clown. Tanner patted him down aggressively, his hands rough. He found nothing but a wallet and a phone. "Where's the gun?" "I don't have a weapon," Julian said. His cheek pressed against the car. "A drug dealer like you always has a gun." "I am a surgeon," Julian repeated, enunciating every syllable. Tanner stepped back, frustrated. No weed, no gun. Just a black man in a real uniform who spoke with more clarity than he did. It infuriated him. "You're resisting," Tanner muttered. "I'm standing perfectly still," Julian replied. "I said stop resisting," Tanner shouted, mostly for the benefit of the dash cam, trying to build a story that did not exist. He grabbed Julian's arm and twisted it behind his back with a torque that threatened to dislocate the shoulder of a surgeon. "Hey!" Julian yelled as pain shot down his arm. "Watch the arm! I'm a surgeon. You break that. You end my career." "I'll end you," Tanner hissed. Tanner kicked Julian's legs apart harder. Julian stumbled, his balance compromised. As he tried to steady himself, his foot slipped on the loose gravel. He lurched backward and bumped into Tanner. It was an accident, nothing more. To Tanner, it was an opportunity. "He's going for my gun!" Tanner screamed. The world seemed to slow. Julian saw Corbin draw his weapon, eyes wide with panic. He saw Tanner stumbling back, face twisted in a snarl of opportunity. "No!" Julian shouted, raising his hands, palms open. I slipped! Tanner was not listening. He drew his service pistol. "Drop him, Corbin! Drop him!" The sound of gunshots in open air is nothing like the movies. It is a flat, hard crack that slaps the eardrums. Crack, crack. 2 shots. Julian felt the impacts before he heard the sound. It was as if a sledgehammer had slammed into his lower abdomen. The air left his lungs in a rush. He staggered back, hands instinctively going to his stomach. He looked down. The pristine blue fabric of his trousers just below the belt line was turning black and wet. He looked up, eyes wide, shock overriding the pain. Tanner stood there, smoke drifting from the barrel of his Glock. Corbin had not fired. The rookie stood frozen, gun shaking in his hands, staring in horror. Julian gasped. "I am a doctor." He collapsed. The gravel dug into his cheek. The smell of pine and gasoline filled his nose. He tried to breathe, but his diaphragm was spasming. His medical training kicked in, a detached clinical voice in his head analyzing the damage. Gunshot wound to the lower quadrant. Possible bowel perforation. Possible iliac artery involvement. Bleeding is venous but heavy. Shock is imminent. He needed pressure. He tried to move his hands to the wound, but his limbs felt like lead. "Suspect down," Tanner said into his radio, his voice eerily calm. "Tried to grab my weapon." Shots fired. Tanner walked over to where Julian lay. He did not offer first aid. He did not check for a pulse. He kicked Julian's hand away from the wound. "Don't move," Tanner commanded. "Help me," Julian whispered. I'm bleeding out. Should have thought of that before you tried to kill a cop. Tanner spat. Corbin ran over, hyperventilating. Sarge, is he? Oh God, look at the uniform. Sarge, that's a real uniform. Look at the name tag. Major. That's a major, Sarge. It's a costume, you idiot. Tanner snapped, though a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes. He stared at the blood pooling on the asphalt. There was a lot of blood. We need an ambulance, Corbin said, reaching for his radio. Wait, Tanner said, grabbing Corbin's wrist. Get our story straight first. He lunged. He went for your gun. I saved your life. You got that? Sarge, he's dying. Do you want to go to jail, Corbin? Do you? Tanner got in the rookie's face. He attacked us. Say it. Julian's vision was tunneling. The edges of the world were turning gray. He thought of Lila, the cake, the 10 candles. I promised. With trembling fingers, he reached into his pocket. Not for a weapon, for his phone. Tanner saw the movement. He's reaching again. He raised his gun. Don't! Corbin screamed, finally breaking. He shoved Tanner's arm down. He's grabbing a phone. Just a phone. Corbin fell to his knees beside Julian. He was not a medic, but he was human. He grabbed a trauma dressing from his belt and pressed it against the wound in Julian's abdomen. Hang on, buddy, hang on, Corbin stammered. Julian looked at the rookie. My pocket, he wheezed. Phone. Call Beck. Who? Colonel Beck. Fort Stewart. Tanner snatched the phone from the ground. It was unlocked. Julian had been using the GPS. Tanner looked at the screen. The background photo showed Julian in full desert camouflage, shaking hands with the President of the United States. Tanner's face went pale. The color drained from him so fast he looked like a ghost. Oh, he whispered. Oh no. The radio on Tanner's shoulder crackled. Dispatch to Unit 4. We have reports of shots fired on Route 17. Update. Tanner stared at the phone. He stared at the dying man. He stared at the major's rank insignia, now soaked in blood. Unit 4, Tanner said, his voice trembling. Suspect down. Send EMS and send a supervisor. Julian. A voice came from the phone. Tanner had accidentally hit the recents tab and dialed the last number. Julian, are you close? Lila is waiting to blow out the candles. It was his wife, Lena. Tanner panicked and ended the call. He looked at Corbin. We stick to the story, he said, but the conviction was gone. It was too late, because on the dashboard of the Chevelle, a small red light was blinking. Julian had a dash cam, and unlike Tanner's body cam, which he had conveniently forgotten to activate until after the shots, the Chevelle's camera had been recording the entire time. It had captured the hands on the wheel. It had captured the compliance. It had captured the slip. And it had captured the murder in Tanner's eyes. Julian's eyes rolled back. The darkness took him. The waiting room at Liberty Regional Medical Center was quiet, save for the hum of the vending machines and the frantic tapping of a foot. Lena Holt, Julian's wife, sat in a plastic chair, clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Lila was with her aunt. Lena had been told there had been an accident. Then the doors burst open. It was not a doctor. It was a phalanx of green. 6 soldiers in fatigues marched in, moving with synchronized, predatory grace. In the center was a man wearing the eagles of a colonel, Colonel Harlan Beck. His face was a mask of thunder. Behind him stood 2 men in dark suits, Army CID investigators. Lena stood up. Colonel? Beck walked straight to her, ignoring the hospital security guard who tried to intercept him. He took Lena's hands. His voice, usually gravel and iron, was gentle. Lena, he's in surgery. Our own team is in there with the civilian doctors. We flew in our vascular specialist by helicopter 10 minutes ago. Is he? He's a fighter, Lena. You know that. Beck straightened. "But I need you to tell me exactly what the police told you." They said he attacked a police officer. They said he had a weapon." Lena began to cry. "Julian doesn't even own a gun, Colonel, you know that." Beck turned to the CID agents. "You hear that?" "Loud and clear, Colonel," one of the agents replied. At that moment, the sheriff of Liberty County, Dean Mallory, walked into the waiting room. He looked sweaty. He saw the soldiers and faltered. "Sheriff?" Beck said. He did not shout. He did not have to. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "Colonel Beck," Sheriff Mallory said, trying to regain composure. "This is a civilian police matter. Your man assaulted my deputy. We have it in the report." Beck took a step closer. He was 3 inches taller than the sheriff and 50 pounds of muscle heavier. "Sheriff, let me make something crystal clear. Major Julian Holt is a federal asset. He is a high-ranking officer of the United States Army, and I have a witness who says your deputy was the aggressor." "Witness? Who?" Mallory scoffed. "It was a dark road, just my 2 boys and your major." Beck smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "The witness is the cloud, Sheriff. Major Holt's car uploads telemetry and interior video in real time. We pulled the footage from the server minutes after his wife called us saying he hadn't come home." Sheriff Mallory's jaw dropped. "We saw it all," Beck whispered. "We saw your boy Tanner torture a compliant officer. We saw him shoot an unarmed man. And we saw him try to cook up a story." Beck leaned in until his nose was inches from the sheriff's. "This isn't a traffic stop anymore, Sheriff. This is an attempted assassination of a field-grade officer. You aren't dealing with internal affairs. You're dealing with the Pentagon." The doors opened again. A doctor stepped out looking exhausted. He wore army scrubs. "Colonel, Mrs. Holt." "Talk to me, Major," Beck barked. "He's critical. We lost a kidney. He lost 4 liters of blood. But we got the bleeding stopped. He's stable. He's going to make it." Lena collapsed into Beck's arms, sobbing. Beck held her, his eyes fixed on the sheriff over her shoulder. "Get your deputies off my hospital grounds," Beck said softly. "If I see Tanner or Corbin within 1 mile of this building, I will have the military police arrest them for interfering with a federal investigation. And Sheriff, lawyer up." The morning sun over Liberty County usually brought a slow, humid heat that made pine sap run and asphalt sticky. But the morning after the shooting on Route 17, the atmosphere felt frozen. Sheriff Dean Mallory sat in his office, blinds drawn. On his desk sat a cold cup of coffee and a phone that had not stopped ringing. First, it was the local news, then the state troopers, then the governor's office. But the call that made his hands shake came from a blocked number. It was the Pentagon, specifically, the office of the Judge Advocate General. They did not scream. They did not threaten. They simply informed him that a team of federal FBI agents and Army CID investigators were en route to seize all evidence regarding the attempted murder of Major Julian Holt. "Attempted murder?" Mallory had stammered. "It's an officer-involved shooting investigation. Standard procedure." The voice on the other end had been calm. That was what terrified Sheriff Mallory most. "Not when the victim is a federal officer on active duty, Sheriff, and certainly not when we have cloud-based telemetry that directly contradicts your deputy's initial report." The line went dead. Mallory stood there for a long moment, the receiver still pressed to his ear. Then he slowly lowered the phone and set it back into its cradle with exaggerated care, as if a sudden movement might detonate something hidden inside it. Across from him, the chair meant for calm conversations was occupied by Deputy Brock Tanner. Tanner looked nothing like the swaggering bully who had strutted down a dark roadside earlier. His uniform was soaked through with sweat. The khaki had darkened at the collar and under the arms. His duty belt sagged crookedly on his hips. He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair, breathing too fast. "They can't come in here, Sheriff," Tanner shouted. his voice cracking. "This is our jurisdiction. This is a county matter. I did my job." He reached. Corbin saw it. Mallory's jaw tightened. He slammed his palm down on the desk hard enough to rattle the framed commendations behind him. "Corbin is in interview room B, crying his eyes out, Brock," Mallory snapped. "And Corbin is talking about a cell phone. He's talking about you kicking the suspect while he was already down. He's talking about you turning off your body camera." Tanner spun on him. "Corbin is a coward." He froze. "I protected him." "You shot a United States Army surgeon, Brock," Mallory roared. "Do you have any idea who that man is?" Tanner opened his mouth, then shut it again. "He's not just a doctor," Mallory went on, his voice shaking now with the creeping realization of scale. "He's a trauma surgeon assigned to Fort Stewart. He's a decorated officer. He's got a Silver Star. He's saved more lives in a week than you've saved in your entire miserable career." Tanner shook his head violently. No, that's not. He was lying. He had a nice car. He talked back. He was wearing dress blues, Brock." "That doesn't mean anything," Tanner shouted. "People fake that stuff all the time." The intercom on Mallory's desk buzzed, sharp and sudden. "Sheriff," came the shaky voice of the dispatcher. There are vehicles outside." Mallory closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. "News vans?" "No, sir," the dispatcher said. "Black SUVs, government plates, and Humvees." Tanner ran to the window and yanked the blinds apart. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone had flipped a switch. Outside, the small county sheriff's department had transformed into a staging ground. A convoy of black SUVs filled the parking lot, parked with military precision. 2 matte green military police Humvees from Fort Stewart blocked the exits, engines idling. Soldiers stood nearby, not aggressive, not shouting, simply present and watching. Men and women in dark jackets with bold yellow lettering moved with quiet efficiency, stringing tape, setting up portable lights, photographing everything. They were not there to ask permission. They were there to take over. "They're here for me," Tanner whispered. His hand drifted unconsciously toward his holster. "Don't!" Mallory hissed, stepping between him and the window. "Don't you even think about it. You hand them your badge. You hand them your gun. If you resist, they will put you down. And I won't lift a finger to stop them." The front doors burst open. No knock. No announcement. A woman in a sharp gray suit strode in as if she owned the building. Her heels clicked against the linoleum with crisp authority. 2 soldiers flanked her, not pointing weapons, simply ensuring nothing stupid happened. "Sheriff Mallory," the woman said, holding up a folder. "Special Agent Mara Quinn, Federal Bureau of Investigation." She flipped the folder open, displaying a stack of papers. "This is a federal warrant for the arrest of Deputy Brock Tanner and Deputy Lyle Corbin on charges of deprivation of rights under color of law, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder of a federal officer." Tanner stumbled backward. "You can't do this. I have qualified immunity." Agent Quinn did not even look at him. "We are also seizing your servers," she continued evenly. "Your body cam archives, your dash cam footage, your dispatch logs, and any personal devices used by involved officers within the last 48 hours. Mallory swallowed. "Agent Quinn." She turned her gaze on him then, sharp and measuring. "Sheriff, your cooperation will be noted. Your obstruction will be prosecuted." Tanner laughed, high and brittle. "This is I feared for my life. That's the law." Quinn finally faced him. "No, Deputy. That was the story. The evidence tells a different one." She nodded to one of the agents. A tablet was brought forward, its screen already lit. "Your body camera stopped recording 6 seconds before the shooting," Quinn said. "Your dash cam audio continued. You forgot about the microphone." Tanner's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "We also have data from the victim's phone," Quinn went on. GPS, accelerometer, timestamps. And we have footage from a private agricultural drone flying over Route 17 at the time of the stop. Cloud-based telemetry doesn't lie, Deputy. She leaned in slightly. You didn't fear for your life, Deputy. You were angry. And you panicked. Tanner's knees buckled. He dropped into the chair, hands shaking. You don't understand, he muttered. He looked at me like I was nothing. Quinn straightened. You treated him like he was nothing. She gestured. Cuff him. 2 agents stepped forward. Tanner did not resist as the cuffs closed around his wrists. As they led him out, the entire station was silent. The secretaries, the other deputies, the janitor, they all watched. Tanner, the bully who had terrorized the county for years, the man who had bragged about thumping thugs, was being marched out in his own handcuffs. Outside, the scene was chaotic. The press had arrived. Cameras flashed as Tanner was shoved into the back of a federal vehicle. But the real consequence was still unfolding. As the convoy pulled away, Sheriff Mallory's phone rang again. It was the county commissioner. Dean, the commissioner said, his voice trembling. I just got a call from the Department of Defense. They're pulling the contract. What contract? The training contract, Dean. The Fort Stewart Urban Combat Training Simulations we host in the old quarry. The one that pays for 40% of your department's budget. They canceled it. Effective immediately. They cited lack of confidence in local law enforcement integrity. Mallory dropped the phone. The funding, the new cruisers, the tactical gear, it was all gone. Tanner had not just ended his own career. He had defunded the entire department with 2 bullets. Karma had arrived. And it had brought a sledgehammer. Major Julian Holt woke 3 days later. The room was white and smelled of antiseptic. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his abdomen pinned him down. He groaned. Easy, Major, easy. He turned his head. Lena was there, sleeping in a chair, holding his hand. But the voice belonged to Colonel Beck. Sir? Julian croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. You've been out for 72 hours, Julian. You lost a kidney. They had to reconstruct part of your intestine, but you're alive. Julian closed his eyes. The memories flooded back. The lights, the gravel, the look in Tanner's eyes. My daughter? The birthday? She's fine. She's with Lena's sister. We told her Daddy is a superhero who got hurt saving people. She believes it because it's true. Beck poured a cup of water and held the straw to Julian's lips. Drink. Julian drank. The deputy, Tanner, in federal custody without bail, Beck said with grim satisfaction. The FBI took the case. And Julian. The video? The dashcam? It's everywhere. Millions of views. The Army released it to the press after Tanner's lawyer tried to claim you reached for a weapon. It changed everything. Beck pulled up a chair. People are angry, Julian. Not just here. Everywhere. There are protests outside the courthouse, but it's not just anger. It's respect. The video shows you staying calm. It shows you identifying yourself. It shows you being the perfect officer while he acted like a thug. You won the war before the trial even started. Julian looked out the window. I didn't want a war, sir. I just wanted to go home. I know, Beck said. But you're a soldier. Sometimes the war comes to you. When the trial finally began, the courthouse in Savannah was surrounded by barricades. On one side, supporters of the police waved flags. On the other, thousands of citizens, veterans, and civil rights activists stood in silence, holding signs that read, Justice for Major Holt. Brock Tanner sat at the defendant's table. He looked smaller now. He had lost weight in prison. His cheap suit did not fit. His lawyer, a loud man named Victor Lang, who usually defended drunk drivers, was sweating. The prosecution was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Claire Donovan. She did not need theatrics. She had the evidence. The courtroom was packed. In the front row sat the top brass of Fort Stewart, all in full dress blues. It was a wall of silent, intimidating authority. The defense tried their usual strategy, character assassination. "Isn't it true, Major Holt?" Lang asked, pacing in front of the witness stand where Julian sat in his wheelchair. "That you were tired? That you were driving aggressively?" "I was driving the speed limit," Julian said calmly. His voice was quiet, but it carried to the back of the room. "But you admitted to the officer you had a weapon in the car, didn't you?" "I said I had no weapon. I said I was a surgeon." "But you reached, didn't you? You made a sudden movement." Julian looked at Tanner. Tanner would not meet his eyes. "I slipped on the gravel," Julian said, "because your client kicked my legs out from under me." "Objection!" Lang yelled. "Speculation!" "Overruled," the judge said. "The witness is describing his experience." Then came the twist Tanner had not seen coming. The prosecution calls Deputy Lyle Corbin to the stand. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Tanner's head snapped up. Corbin? Corbin was supposed to be loyal. They had the blue wall of silence. Corbin walked in. He looked terrified, but he walked straight to the stand. He had taken a plea deal. Probation and a lifetime ban from law enforcement in exchange for truthful testimony. "Deputy Corbin," Claire Donovan asked, "in your report, you initially stated that Major Holt lunged for Deputy Tanner's gun. Was that statement true?" Corbin looked at the jury. Then he looked at Julian. He started to cry. "No, ma'am." "Why did you write it?" "Because," Corbin pointed a shaking finger at Tanner, "because he told me to. He said if I didn't, we'd both go to jail. He said, we have to get our story straight. He said, he's just another thug. Nobody will care." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, but the damage was done. Tanner's face was a mask of shock. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. "And," Corbin continued, wiping his nose, "when Tanner realized who the major was, when he saw the ID, he tried to delete the call log on the major's phone. He tried to hide the fact that he hung up on the major's wife." A murmur of fury went through the crowd. Even the jury looked disgusted. Then Donovan played the video. On the massive screens in the courtroom, the silence of the country road played out. The audio was crisp. "I am a surgeon. I don't give a damn who you know. The kick, the slip, the shots. Crack, crack." And then the sound of Julian bleeding on the ground, whispering, "Help me," and Tanner's voice. "Should have thought of that before you tried to kill a cop." When the lights came up, Tanner's lawyer had his head in his hands. He knew it was over. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. We find the defendant, Brock Tanner, guilty on all counts. Tanner did not scream this time. He simply slumped. The fight had left him. But the judge was not finished. "Mr. Tanner," the judge said, looking over his glasses, "you betrayed your badge. You betrayed your oath. And you nearly killed a man who has dedicated his life to saving others. You showed no remorse. You offered no aid. You thought you were above the law." The judge paused. "I am sentencing you to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. And following your term, you will be subject to a restitution order of $2 million to be paid to the victim." As the bailiffs hauled Tanner away, he looked back at the gallery. He saw the wall of Army uniforms. He saw Colonel Beck. He saw Lena Holt holding Lila's hand. And he saw Major Julian Holt. Julian did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply nodded. A slow, solemn nod. It was the nod of a surgeon who had just cut out a tumor. The karma was not just the prison sentence. It was the fact that Tanner would spend the rest of his life in a federal penitentiary surrounded by the very people he had tormented, known as the dirty cop who shot a hero. He was going to the bottom of the food chain. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was intense. Julian rolled his wheelchair to the microphones. The world waited for him to speak. He could have raged. He could have cursed the police. Instead, he leaned into the mic. "Justice was served today," Julian said. "But justice doesn't give me my kidney back. It doesn't take away the nightmares my daughter has. This wasn't a victory. It was a correction. We have to be better. We have to ensure that a uniform, whether it's mine or a police officer's, stands for protection, not power." He looked at the camera. "And to the soldiers of Fort Stewart, thank you for watching my 6." As the screen faded, viewers knew this was not just a story. It was a warning. The echoes of the verdict in Savannah truly reshaped the landscape of Liberty County. In the immediate wake of Brock Tanner's 35-year sentence, the air in the region felt different, thinner, as if a great pressure had finally been released. But for Colonel Julian Holt, the transition from victim to victor was not a simple stroll into the sunset. It was a grueling, uphill march through physical pain and psychological trauma. In the time that followed his recovery, the Georgia heat remained as oppressive as ever. But the atmosphere inside the Fort Stewart Garrison headquarters was cool and disciplined. Julian stood in front of a mirror in his office, adjusting the belt of his Class A uniform. He was no longer a major. The silver oak leaves had been replaced by the spread wings of a colonel's eagle. The promotion was partly recognition of him in grade, but mostly a testament to his conduct under fire. Fire that had come not from a foreign insurgent, but from a domestic betrayer of the badge. He leaned against his desk, feeling the familiar dull throb in his lower abdomen. One kidney was gone, and a web of surgical mesh now held his core together. He had been a man who spent 12 hours on his feet in a trauma bay. Now he was a man who had to calculate his energy levels like a battery. But his hands, the hands Tanner had tried to destroy, remained as steady as granite. A knock at the door broke his reverie. It was Colonel Beck, now nearing retirement, but still carrying himself with rigid posture. "The board is ready for you, Julian," Beck said, his voice softer than it used to be. "And the press is at the gate. The Holt Act just cleared the state Senate. You're officially part of Georgia law now." The Holt Act was the hard karma Tanner never saw coming. It was not just about one man going to prison. It was about dismantling the shadows where men like Tanner lived. The law mandated that any officer-involved shooting involving a military member would be automatically handed to federal investigators, bypassing local good old boy networks entirely. Furthermore, it stripped the pensions of any officer found to have intentionally tampered with evidence. "I didn't want a law named after me, sir," Julian admitted, grabbing his cover. "I just wanted to be a surgeon." "You still are, Julian, just a different kind. You're cutting out the rot in the system now," Beck replied. As they walked through the halls, the soldiers they passed snapped to attention with a crispness that felt personal. They were not merely saluting a superior officer. They were saluting the man who had survived the unthinkable and refused to be silenced. The real-life consequences for the rest of the players were equally profound. Sheriff Dean Mallory, once the king of his small county, was now a pariah. After the Army pulled its multi-million-dollar training contracts, the Liberty County Sheriff's Department collapsed under its own weight. Mallory had tried to run for a municipal seat in a neighboring town, but the video of Julian bleeding on the gravel followed him like a ghost. He ended up working as a private security consultant for a warehouse firm, a shadow of the man who once thought he ruled Route 17. Then there was Deputy Lyle Corbin. The rookie who had broken the blue wall had been spared prison, but he was finished in law enforcement. Julian had heard through the grapevine that Corbin was struggling, working odd jobs and battling the guilt of that night. In a move that surprised everyone, Julian reached out to him. They met in a quiet park in Hinesville, far from the cameras. Corbin had looked aged, his eyes haunted. "Why did you call me, Colonel?" "Because you were the one who finally called the ambulance," Julian said. "Tanner would have let me die. You chose to be a human being, even if it took you a few minutes to find your spine. I want you to use that spine for something else." With Julian's quiet recommendation, Corbin enrolled in a vocational rehabilitation program. He was not a cop anymore, but he was learning to be a paramedic, a job where he would be the one saving lives on the side of the road instead of watching them slip away. It was a redemptive arc that turned a moment of cowardice into a lifetime of service. The climax of Julian's recovery came on a crisp October afternoon at the Uniformed Services University in Bethesda. He had been invited to deliver the keynote address to the graduating class of military surgeons. As he looked out at the sea of young, eager faces, he saw Lena and Lila in the front row. Lila was wearing a locket he had given her for the 11th birthday he had nearly missed. The locket contained a piece of the Purple Heart ribbon he had been awarded. "There will be moments in your career," Julian told the graduates, his voice resonating with a power that needed no microphone, "where the enemy isn't wearing a uniform. Sometimes the enemy is arrogance. Sometimes it's the assumption that power gives you the right to be cruel. When I was lying on that gravel, I wasn't thinking about my rank. I was thinking about the oath I took. That oath isn't to a person or a badge, it's to an idea." He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto a young captain in the third row. "The man who shot me thought he was the law. He forgot that the law is a shield, not a sword. He lost everything, his career, his freedom, and his name, because he forgot that in this country we take care of our own, and the United States Army has a very long memory." The applause lasted for 5 minutes. The final twist came a few months later. Julian received a letter from the federal prison in Allenwood. It was from Brock Tanner. It was not an apology. It was a desperate, rambling plea for Julian to intervene in his restitution payments, which were garnishing the meager cents Tanner earned in the prison laundry. Tanner complained about the unfairness of his life, about how the other inmates treated him, and how he felt betrayed by the system he had served. Julian read the letter twice. He did not feel anger. He did not feel jubile. He felt the profound, cold weight of justice. He realized that Tanner's greatest punishment was not the bars or the orange jumpsuit. It was the fact that even now Tanner could not understand what he had done wrong. He was trapped in a prison of his own narcissism. Julian did not reply. Instead, he took the letter and placed it in a shredder. As the paper turned into confetti, he felt the last tie to that night on Route 17 sever. That evening, he went home to a house full of life. He helped Lila with her science project and sat on the porch with Lena watching the Georgia stars come out. His stomach ached, and he would never run a marathon again. But he was whole. The real-life karma had come full circle. The army surgeon was home. The corrupt deputy was forgotten. And the road, the long, dark stretch of Route 17, was now patrolled by men and women who knew that if they ever stepped out of line, the weight of the entire Pentagon would be waiting to meet them. This story serves as a powerful reminder that while injustice can move fast, the truth moves with the weight of an entire nation behind it. Major Julian Holt's life changed in a heartbeat on that dark road, but his courage to remain calm and the United States Army's refusal to back down ensured that a bully's career did not merely end. It became a lesson for the world. True power is not found in a holster. It is found in integrity. If you found this story of hard-hitting karma as gripping as we did, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep-dive dramatic retellings of real-life justice. Share this with someone who needs to see that no one is above the law. Let us know in the comments, do you think 35 years was a fair sentence for Tanner? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.